I haven't really got a direct question, but I've had my own experiences, but I'm more curious about how to make myself develop my abilities, become more aware. And I've been doing a lot of studying about the pineal gland and how, like your third eye, how that can help you with your abilities, and also for out of body, astral projection, that kind of thing. And I was wondering about, my feeling is that I had a lot more experiences when I was younger. I lived abroad in different countries, different cultures. My feeling is that in our culture here in the States especially, there's so much crap in our environment, in our bodies, whether it's fluoride in the water, whether it's a toxic pollution with the air, the food, whatever else we may be exposed to. And that ends up affecting our abilities via the pineal gland and other routes into our body, are, I think, suppressed. But I was wondering, are there any kind of protocols that you use or you could suggest to others to help them further develop their abilities, or to detoxify, to get back into your original abilities as a younger person, perhaps?
Yes, and I would say first that first I would say I'm just an ordinary guy. I wasn't born with any kind of psychic gifts or talents or any of that stuff. I ended up as an engineer, so you know the kind of mind I have if you know anything about engineers.
Left brain.
And what I found is the key to opening and expanding awareness. I'm sure that there are physical body things you can do. I am sure that changes to diet, the elimination of some toxins, I'm sure those things can have a positive effect. But for me, the most important way, or the most important thing in learning to open your perception, to expand your awareness, have an experience that conflicts with your beliefs. And by the nature of the experience, be forced to accept that experience as real. Because when you accept the experience as real, the beliefs that it conflicted with can no longer be there. If you understand that beliefs, or you think of beliefs as something like colored bits of cellophane that have covered over the windows of your perception, each time you have an experience that conflicts with beliefs and you accept the experience as real, some of those beliefs are peeled off your window. Your perception opens. Your awareness expands. When you have more experiences that conflict with beliefs and you accept those as real, it removes those beliefs. Those beliefs are the things, in my view, that block, color, and distort our perception. So, yeah, I think that there are dietary things. I'm sure there are some body exercise things, perhaps yoga, perhaps Tai Chi. I'm sure there are some body exercise things along with diet and all the rest that can have positive effects. But the thing that seems to have a much greater control are our beliefs. If I'm the kind of person who believes that there's no such thing as ghosts, that belief alone may completely block my perception of a ghost that's standing right in front of me going, blah, 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 because my belief has blocked perception of it. Now, if I just, for some reason, happen to get a glimpse of the person and can in some way verify that I actually saw it, then I accept that experience as real, and my perception of non-physical ghosts just got more open. I talk about my workshops as exploring the afterlife, but as I mentioned before, what this is really about is about opening and expanding your conscious awareness. Because as long as I believe I'm just a physical body, and as long as I believe, as most scientists do, that only physical things exist, those beliefs prevent me from perceiving beyond them. Things may slip through, or when I was much younger, before I took on some of those beliefs, it may have been a simple matter to have those kind of perceptions. But as I've aged and taken on beliefs from my parents, my friends, my schools, my government, my religion, and all the rest, those beliefs can have a blocking, distorting, or coloring effect on my perception.
You mentioned in your answer about your experiences challenging your beliefs. I've sought out experiences that have really done that for me, and that's why I've changed my beliefs in a very positive way, I feel. But I've also come much more to trust my intuition, my senses. I wouldn't call it a sixth sense or an ESP, but I'd say it was definitely something going on I really couldn't explain. And had a lot more to do with localities where very emotional events took place in past, not my personal life, I would say, or past life, but for many other people that I became aware of, actually. So how would you seek out these experiences? What have you done? Have you challenged yourself in your beliefs?
Well, what kinds of experiences have challenged my beliefs?
Right.
Is that
How have you gone about gaining those experiences in your everyday life? Take an effort to really go out and seek out some. Give me an example. I lived many years in Europe.
an example that happens to everybody? You're sitting on your sofa. You're suddenly thinking about someone you haven't talked to for quite a while. The phone rings and it's them.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, most of us see that as a coincidence. Most people say, oh, it's just a coincidence. You just happen to be thinking about the person when they call on the phone. What I see is your perceiver, somewhere within the environment in which it exists, picked up that person calling you or thinking about calling you and brought to your attention that person just in time for the phone to ring and you to say, geez, I haven't thought of you for 10 years and I was just thinking about you. And the phone rang. That's one that happens to most people. And you can call it intuition, you can call it coincidence. In everyday life, there are lots and lots and lots of little things like that happen. One of the books that I did read, and I don't read a lot of books, James Redfield's books on 10th Insight. And one of the things he talked about was you realize you're on the beginning of the path to expanding your awareness when you begin to recognize coincidence. Because I think he was pointing at the same thing. There are lots of things that happen to us that we write off as coincidence. I'll try not to make this story too long. Because there's another part to this, to an answer to your question. It has to do with guidance. Many, many years ago, in my early 20s, I was married to a woman named Barbara, my first wife. And one Saturday morning, Barb said, I want to go shopping. I want you to come with me. I said, okay, what are you going to shop for? And she said, shoes. And I thought, oh, God, no. Because I knew what was going to happen. We're going to drive to some shopping mall. We're going to go in. The first shoe store we go in, she's going to try on every pair of shoes that'll fit her. The one pair she kind of likes. And then we're going to go through every shoe store in that mall. She's going to try on every pair of shoes that fit her. We're going to go back eventually to the very first store, and she's going to buy the very first pair she liked. And I'm going to have to go through this whole thing. And I considered saying, why don't you call your sister Linda and take her with you? But I thought, I'm a new husband. I should be a nice guy. So I said, okay. Well, then she dropped the big bomb in Minneapolis. And I thought, oh, geez, it's worse than I thought. Being inside a mall is one thing. But Minneapolis is this tangled town of one-way streets and dead ends and things that, okay, I've already committed. So that Saturday, we're driving through Minneapolis and we're looking for shoe stores. You know, she's got the phone book along with the addresses, and we've got a map, and we're trying to find shoe stores. And as we're going down this street and down that street, we drive past, and Barb says, "Oh, stop, 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 that's the bookstore." The bookstore? Jeez. And I pull over to the curb. I'm already headed up to here. We're shopping. I've enjoyed this as much as I can stand it. I get the car parked. She's already out of the car heading to the bookstore when I'm still crawling out of the car. I get in. I stand next to the doorway, kind of tapping my toe, hoping that she'll take pity on me and come back out of the bookstore and get moving. She doesn't. Well, 2 weeks before this, Barbara and I have been sitting, having dinner, talking about Native Americans. 2 weeks before we entered this bookstore, I had been standing washing dishes at the sink and said out loud, "I wonder what the role of the medicine man was in American Indian culture." I asked it to no one in particular, but I asked the question.
Out loud or just to yourself?
Pardon?
Out loud or just to yourself?
Out loud, which I think is an important part of guidance.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah. And 2 weeks later, we're standing in the bookstore. I'm getting nowhere with getting her attention to get out of the store, so I start walking down one of the aisles. Something kind of sky blue catches my eye, and there's like an 8.5 by 11 booklet on a pile of things and some sort of like price to give away sort of stuff. I pick this thing up and I open it up randomly and I start reading halfway down the left-hand page. Honest to God, the first words I read were, "The role of the medicine man in American Indian culture was," and I'm thinking, wait a minute. 2 weeks ago, I was standing at the Hemi-Sync and I asked that question. How? And I'm an engineer, and immediately I'm thinking, what's the probability of this happening? So I wind time back down to early Saturday morning when I agreed to go shopping. The probability is 0. I don't even know where we're going. I wind forward until I discover it's in Minneapolis. Well, the probability is not 0, but it's real close to 0. We walk into the bookstore. Now it's at least a finite probability because there's a finite number of pages in the store. And then I thought, but I randomly picked up a book and randomly opened it and randomly started reading halfway down the page, and the question was right there. And I realized probability has nothing to do with this. This was not a random act. This was a guided act. Something was keeping track of where I was, where the bookstore was, where the information was, and somehow, whatever that thing I've come to call guidance is, or you might call your guides, saw to it that we made just the right number of wrong turns to end up going past that bookstore so that I would go in, pick it up. So for me, part of the answer to that question is, yeah, there's something called guidance to consider. Having an experience that conflicts with beliefs, accepting the experience as real, can happen as a result of guidance. When you least expect it, walking into a bookstore, picking up something at random.
Would you say that guidance is coming from your higher self or an outside source? And also, in that same kind of line of thinking, we talked about the higher self earlier and that connection to your higher self. How can you create that connection or encourage that connection to your higher self? Through meditation, through certain protocols, procedures, or just blind intuition or faith? How would you?
Good question. And the first thing I would say is that I didn't do anything to create it at that point. I just became aware of it. And that there are things you can do to become aware of it. In fact, there's an exercise in the third workshop. Well, not an exercise. There are a number of exercises that are all geared toward making direct contact with your higher self, making direct contact with what you could describe as an individual member to represent the higher self to communicate with, because we're typically it's difficult for us to communicate with something that has like 200,000 separate individual minds. It's much easier for us to communicate with someone who looks at least like a single individual, even if they do have that many different minds. So I would say, in my view, guidance typically, yeah, that has to do with higher self. I would also say that I can't rule out the possibility that guidance also comes sometimes from other helpers, people you might call spirits or guides or angels or whatever you might call them. But that I think the vast majority of the kind of guidance I was describing in that story with the book, that's higher self stuff. And learning to make contact and communicate with the higher self is actually pretty easy. It's like I've said before, what I'm teaching is so easy, the hardest thing to do is believe you're doing it.
Thanks, Bruce.
Sure.
I'd like to just add something to that. No, but I'd like to add something to that. I think, like you said, meditation is very helpful. Also, what we do here at our meetings with the Hemi-Sync is a really great way to get you in touch with those kinds of things and help open your mind and your heart to other possibilities and other realms, and that's what we work towards.
Yeah, one of the places I got started way back when was with transcendental meditation, TM, from back in the 70s. And I feel that learning that meditative technique gave me access to a part of my awareness that I wasn't aware of before that. And that Monroe's Hemi-Sync gave me much more predictable, clear, relatively immediate access to whatever it is of me that is more than my physical body. And so my first two books were written as advertisements for the Monroe Institute. I think that what they're doing is marvelous. I think Hemi-Sync is a great tool.